Imagine this, you're walking through the bustling streets of Manhattan, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another day when suddenly someone bumps into you, spills your drink, and instead of apologizing, they turn around and blame you for being in their way. Your heart races, your face flushes, and that familiar surge of anger begins to build. Or maybe you're in a Chicago boardroom presenting months of hard work, only to have a colleague publicly dismiss your ideas with a condescending smirk. Perhaps you're a parent in Los Angeles dealing with a teacher who speaks to you as if you're incapable of understanding your own child's needs. How do you deal with disrespect? This isn't just a question, it's one of the most universal challenges we face in our daily lives. Disrespect comes at us from every direction, from strangers on the subway, colleagues in the office, family members at dinner tables, and even from people we've never met hiding behind social media screens. It's upsetting, it's frustrating, and if we're honest, it can completely derail our entire day, sometimes even our entire week. But what if I told you that over 2,000 years ago, in the bustling markets of ancient Rome and the philosophical schools of Athens, brilliant minds were wrestling with this exact same challenge? What if the solution to handling modern disrespect wasn't found in the latest self-help trend or anger management technique, but in the timeless wisdom of ancient Stoic philosophy? The Stoics weren't just armchair philosophers, they were emperors like Marcus Aurelius who faced political attacks and betrayal. They were teachers like Epictetus who overcame slavery and physical disability. They were advisors like Seneca who navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics. These were people who understood disrespect, injustice, and human cruelty at the deepest levels, yet they developed a philosophy that could transform how we respond to these challenges. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal that would become the Meditations, reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a revolutionary approach to modern living that can transform every difficult interaction you'll ever face. Today, we're going to explore 10 powerful Stoic principles that will completely change how you handle disrespect. These aren't just theoretical concepts, they're practical tools that you can use immediately, whether you're dealing with a rude customer service representative, a dismissive boss, an argumentative family member, or the person who cuts you off in traffic and then has the audacity to honk at you. But here's my challenge to you, don't just watch passively. The Stoics believed that philosophy without practice is worthless. As we journey through these 10 lessons together, I want you to think about the situations in your own life where you felt disrespected, dismissed, or diminished. Consider how these ancient principles might apply to your modern challenges. Are you ready to discover how ancient wisdom can solve your modern problems? Let's begin this transformative journey together. 1. The discipline of perception. Why Stoics stay calm. Meet David, a software engineer at a Seattle tech startup. During yesterday's team meeting, his manager, Jennifer, tore apart his code review in front of the entire development team. "This is sloppy work," she announced, her voice cutting through the conference room. "I expected better from someone with your experience." David felt his chest tighten, his face burn with embarrassment, and his mind immediately began racing with angry thoughts about Jennifer's incompetence and unfairness. But here's where David's story takes an unexpected turn. Instead of letting his emotions spiral out of control, David remembered a fundamental Stoic principle that had changed his life. We are not disturbed by what happens to us, but by how we think about what happens to us. This principle comes directly from Epictetus, the ancient Stoic philosopher who understood suffering intimately. Born into slavery, physically disabled, Epictetus knew what it meant to face genuine hardship and disrespect. Yet he taught us one of the most liberating truths in all of philosophy. People are disturbed not by things, but by the view they take of them. This isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a psychological revolution that modern neuroscience has confirmed. When Jennifer criticized David's work, the actual event was simply sound waves traveling through air, creating vibrations that his ears interpreted as words. The criticism itself had no inherent power to harm him. What created David's distress wasn't Jennifer's words, but his interpretation of those words. His mind added layers of meaning. She thinks I'm incompetent, everyone will lose respect for me, my job is in danger, I'm a failure. But David had learned to practice what the Stoics call the discipline of perception. Instead of accepting his initial emotional reaction as truth, he paused and examined his thoughts. He asked himself, what actually happened here? Jennifer pointed out problems in my code. Is there validity to her feedback? Can I learn from this? Does her delivery method reflect on my worth as a person or professional? Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who faced far greater challenges than workplace criticism, wrote in his personal journal how much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does. He understood that our peace of mind depends not on controlling others' behavior, but on controlling our interpretation of that behavior. Consider Maria, a nurse at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, who regularly faces stressed family members taking out their fear and frustration on medical staff. When Mr. Rodriguez shouted at her last week, calling her incompetent for not allowing him to visit his wife outside visiting hours, Maria's initial impulse was to defend herself angrily. Instead, she applied Stoic perception. His behavior reflected his fear and helplessness, not any truth about her competence or character. The Stoics taught that disrespect is never inherently harmful or offensive, it becomes so only through our judgment and interpretation. When someone disrespects you, their behavior is a product of their own thoughts, emotions, and character, not a reflection of your true value or worth. As Epictetus explained, no one can hurt you without your permission. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting abuse. Rather, it means recognizing that your emotional state remains under your control regardless of others' actions. When your teenage daughter rolls her eyes and mutters whatever after you've asked her to clean her room, you can choose to interpret this as disrespect that ruins your evening, or as typical adolescent behavior that has nothing to do with your worth as a parent. The practice begins with awareness. Throughout your day, notice when you feel disturbed by others' words or actions. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? What assumptions am I making? What if I interpreted this differently? This isn't about making excuses for bad behavior or convincing yourself that black is white. It's about recognizing the difference between facts and your interpretation of facts. Seneca, the Roman statesman and Stoic philosopher, put it perfectly: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most of our suffering from disrespect comes not from the actual words or actions, but from the elaborate stories we construct about what those words and actions mean about us, our relationships, and our future. David returned to his desk that day with something remarkable: inner peace. He reviewed Jennifer's feedback objectively, found several valid points, made the necessary corrections, and even thanked her later for helping him improve his code. His calm response not only preserved his dignity but actually improved his professional relationship with his manager. This is the power of the discipline of perception, the foundation of all Stoic practice and the first step toward unshakable inner calm. 2. The inner citadel: how Stoics reflect on themselves. Maria Gonzalez, a registered nurse at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, had just finished a 12-hour shift when Mrs. Patterson, the daughter of one of her patients, cornered her at the nurse's station. "You people don't care about anything except your paychecks," Mrs. Patterson spat, her voice loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "My mother has been waiting for her pain medication for 20 minutes, and you're just sitting here doing paperwork." Maria's first instinct was to defend herself, to explain that she'd been managing 7 other critical patients, that the medication required doctor approval, that she'd been working non-stop since 6 a.m. But instead of reacting immediately, Maria did something that would have made Marcus Aurelius proud. She turned inward and began to reflect. This practice of self-reflection lies at the heart of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed that the quality of our thoughts determines the quality of our lives, and that we should constantly examine our inner world to ensure we're living according to wisdom and virtue. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Therefore guard accordingly." Maria had learned this lesson through years of practicing Stoic self-examination. Instead of immediately defending herself or attacking Mrs. Patterson's character, she asked herself the crucial questions that every Stoic learns to ask. Is there any truth in what this person is saying? Did I do or say anything that contributed to this situation? How can I respond in a way that aligns with my values and virtues? The practice of self-reflection isn't about self-criticism or accepting blame for others' behavior. Rather, it's about taking responsibility for the one thing we can control: our own thoughts, actions, and responses. Epictetus, who understood hardship intimately, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. But he also emphasized that we must examine our own role in every situation. Consider James Chun, a high school teacher in Boston's Chinatown. When a parent accused him of being culturally insensitive during a parent-teacher conference, James's immediate reaction was anger and defensiveness. But that evening, following his daily Stoic practice, he reflected on the interaction. He asked himself, what exactly did I say? Could my words have been interpreted differently than I intended? What was I trying to accomplish, and did my approach serve that goal? Through honest self-examination, James realized that while his intentions were good, his delivery had been rushed and perhaps dismissive. The parent's accusation, though harshly delivered, contained a grain of truth that James could learn from. This reflection led him to modify his communication style and ultimately improved his relationships with students and parents. Seneca, the Roman philosopher and advisor to emperors, practiced a form of evening reflection that modern Stoics still use today. He would review his day, examining his thoughts, words, and actions without harsh judgment but with honest assessment. When the lamp is taken away, Seneca wrote, and my wife has fallen silent, I examine the whole day and measure my deeds and words, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. The key to Stoic self-reflection is objectivity. We're not trying to beat ourselves up or find fault where none exists. Instead, we're conducting what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above, stepping back from our immediate emotional reactions to see situations more clearly. This practice helps us distinguish between what happened, the facts, and our interpretation of what happened, our story about the facts. Take Sarah Williams, a marketing director at a Chicago advertising agency. When her boss publicly criticized her campaign proposal, calling it uninspired and off-brand, Sarah felt humiliated and angry. But instead of stewing in resentment, she practiced Stoic reflection. She asked herself, what specific feedback did he give? Which parts of his criticism were about the work itself versus his delivery method? How can I use this feedback to improve my next proposal? This self-examination revealed that while her boss's delivery was unnecessarily harsh, several of his points about the campaign were valid. Sarah's reflection allowed her to separate the useful feedback from the emotional sting of public criticism, ultimately making her a better marketer and a more resilient professional. The Stoics understood that self-reflection without action is merely self-indulgence. The goal isn't just to understand ourselves better, but to live better. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. Modern neuroscience has validated what the Stoics knew intuitively. Regular self-reflection literally rewires our brains, making us more resilient, more emotionally intelligent, and better equipped to handle life's challenges. When we practice honest self-examination, we develop what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about our thinking. Maria finished her reflection that night with a plan. She would speak with Mrs. Patterson the next day, acknowledge the delay in medication, and explain the hospital's protocols calmly and compassionately. This wasn't about accepting blame she didn't deserve, but about responding with wisdom and virtue. 3. The power of the pause, how Stoics learn to wait. The doors of the 6th train slammed shut just as James Rodriguez reached the platform at Union Square. He was already running late for a crucial client presentation in Midtown Manhattan, and now he'd have to wait another 4 minutes for the next train. As the packed subway car pulled away, a businessman who just missed the same train turned to James and snarled, "Great, just great. Thanks for blocking the door, genius. Now we're both screwed." James felt the familiar surge of anger rising in his chest. His jaw clenched, his fists tightened, and the words, "What did you just say to me?" were already forming on his lips. But then something remarkable happened. James remembered the wisdom of Seneca, the Roman Stoic who wrote, "Whenever you are angry, be assured that it is not only a present evil, but that you have increased a habit." Instead of unleashing his fury on a stranger, James took a deep breath and paused. This moment, this crucial space between stimulus and response, is where the Stoics discovered one of their most powerful tools for handling disrespect and conflict. The pause isn't just about counting to 10. It's about creating space for wisdom to emerge where anger once lived. Seneca understood anger intimately. As advisor to Emperor Nero, he witnessed and experienced the destructive power of uncontrolled emotions daily. He saw how quick reactions led to broken relationships, ruined careers, and unnecessary suffering. This led him to write extensively about anger, calling it temporary madness, and teaching that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. The Stoics believed that our first impressions and immediate emotional reactions are rarely our wisest responses. When someone disrespects us, our ancient brain, the same one that helped our ancestors survive saber-toothed tigers, floods our system with stress hormones, preparing us for fight or flight. But in modern life, these primitive responses often create more problems than they solve. Consider Lisa Park, a project manager at a tech startup in Austin. During a video conference with investors, her colleague Michael interrupted her mid-sentence and said, "Let me handle this, Lisa. I think I can explain it better." Lisa's immediate impulse was to snap back, to defend her competence publicly. But she'd been practicing Stoic principles for months, and she recognized this moment as an opportunity to pause. In that pause, perhaps only 3 seconds long, Lisa asked herself the questions that Stoics have been asking for centuries. Will my immediate reaction serve my long-term goals? What would a wise person do in this situation? How can I respond in a way that reflects my values rather than my emotions? The pause gave Lisa clarity. She realized that publicly confronting Michael would likely damage the presentation and potentially harm the company's funding prospects. Instead, she calmly said, "I'd appreciate finishing my thought, Michael, and then I'd welcome your input." Her measured response not only preserved the meeting's momentum, but also demonstrated her professionalism to the investors. Marcus Aurelius, who faced constant political attacks and personal betrayals as emperor, wrote in his private journal, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does." He understood that the pause allows us to choose our battles wisely, focusing our energy on what truly matters rather than every slight or provocation. The pause works because it interrupts what psychologists call emotional hijacking, when our emotions take control before our rational mind can engage. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what the Stoics intuited. There's a crucial gap between feeling an emotion and acting on it, and in that gap lies our freedom. Take Carlos Mendez, a construction foreman in Phoenix, who was publicly berated by a client for a minor delay in the project timeline. The client's words were personal and unprofessional, questioning Carlos's competence and work ethic in front of his crew. Carlos's first instinct was to defend himself forcefully. His reputation and authority were at stake, but instead he paused. In that moment of pause, Carlos remembered another piece of Stoic wisdom from Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. He realized that losing his temper would only validate the client's unprofessional behavior and potentially damage his company's reputation. Instead, he calmly said, "I understand your frustration. Let's discuss this privately and find a solution that works for everyone." The pause isn't passive. It's one of the most active things we can do. It requires tremendous strength to resist our immediate impulses and choose a more thoughtful response. As Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." The pause allows us to end the cycle of reactive behavior and begin responding from wisdom. Practically, the pause can be as simple as taking 3 deep breaths, counting to 5, or asking yourself, what would Marcus Aurelius do? The key is creating space between the trigger and your response, allowing your rational mind to engage before your emotions take control. James stood on that subway platform, watching the businessman fume beside him, and felt something remarkable: peace. The next train arrived 2 minutes later, and both men boarded quietly. James arrived at his presentation calm and focused, delivering one of the best pitches of his career. 4. Understanding the human condition: how Stoics have empathy. The lunch rush at Rosario's restaurant in downtown Miami was in full swing when the customer at table 12 began his tirade. Lisa Martinez, the restaurant manager, watched as the man's voice grew louder and more aggressive. "This is absolutely unacceptable," he shouted, waving his credit card in the air. "I've been waiting 45 minutes for a simple pasta dish, and now you're telling me your kitchen made a mistake? This is the worst service I've ever experienced." Every eye in the restaurant turned toward the commotion. Lisa's servers looked mortified, other customers appeared uncomfortable, and Lisa herself felt her defensive instincts kicking in. Her first thought was to firmly but politely ask the customer to lower his voice or leave. But then she remembered something Epictetus had taught: "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves." Instead of seeing an unreasonable customer attacking her establishment, Lisa chose to see a human being in distress. This shift in perspective, from judgment to understanding, represents one of the most transformative aspects of Stoic philosophy. The ancient Stoics understood that empathy isn't just a nice-to-have quality. It's a fundamental tool for navigating human relationships and reducing our own suffering in the process. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, regularly reminded himself of our shared humanity. He wrote, "We were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower." This wasn't mere philosophical poetry. It was a practical recognition that understanding others' perspectives makes us more effective in dealing with difficult situations. As Lisa approached table 12, she noticed details she might have missed in her initial defensive reaction. The man's hands were shaking slightly. His wedding ring caught the light as he gestured, and she could see stress lines around his eyes. She realized this wasn't just about slow service. This was about something deeper. "Sir," Lisa said gently, "I can see you're really frustrated, and I want to make this right. Can you tell me what's going on?" The man's aggressive posture softened slightly. "Look, I'm sorry for raising my voice," he said, his anger deflating. "It's my wife's birthday, and I promised her a special lunch. I took time off work, made reservations, and now everything's going wrong. She's been looking forward to this all week." This is the power of empathy in action. By seeking to understand rather than simply react, Lisa transformed a potentially explosive situation into an opportunity for genuine human connection. The Stoics understood that most aggressive behavior stems from pain, fear, or insecurity, rarely from genuine malice. Consider David Kim, a customer service representative at a Chicago telecommunications company. When Mrs. Johnson called screaming about her internet being down for the third time this month, David's training told him to follow protocol. Apologize, troubleshoot, escalate if necessary. But his Stoic practice told him to dig deeper. "Mrs. Johnson, I can hear how frustrated you are," David said. "Help me understand what this outage means for you today." It turned out Mrs. Johnson was a freelance graphic designer working from home, and the internet outages were costing her clients and threatening her livelihood. Her anger wasn't really about the technical problem. It was about fear for her financial security. Understanding this allowed David to not only solve the technical issue, but also provide her with a backup solution and a service credit that addressed her real concerns. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of Rome's most respected philosophers, understood suffering intimately. He taught that when we encounter difficult people, we should remember that every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is thought to aim at some good. Even when people behave badly, they're usually trying to meet some legitimate needs: security, respect, connection, or control. This doesn't mean excusing bad behavior or becoming a doormat. Stoic empathy is about understanding, not enabling. When someone disrespects you, empathy helps you see past their words to their underlying motivations, which often have nothing to do with you personally. Take Jennifer Walsh, a high school principal in Portland, who was confronted by an angry parent demanding to know why his son was suspended for fighting. The father's initial approach was aggressive and accusatory. "You people don't understand kids these days. You're just looking for reasons to punish them." Instead of becoming defensive, Jennifer practiced stoic empathy. She recognized that behind the father's aggression was likely concern for his son and perhaps feelings of helplessness about his child's behavior. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "I can see you're worried about Jake. Let's sit down and talk about what happened and how we can help him moving forward." Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." When we approach conflicts with empathy, we end the cycle of mutual defensiveness and begin the possibility of genuine resolution. The customer at Lisa's restaurant left that day with a complimentary meal, a sincere apology, and a reservation for the following week. More importantly, Lisa had transformed what could have been a negative experience for everyone in the restaurant into a demonstration of grace under pressure. Empathy doesn't make us weak. It makes us wise. 5. The North Star of Character: How Stoicism is Based on Virtue. Michael Thompson stood at the front of his 8th grade classroom at Roosevelt Middle School in Boston's Roxbury neighborhood, facing the most challenging moment of his 15-year teaching career. Mrs. Rodriguez, the mother of one of his students, had just finished a 5-minute verbal assault on his teaching methods, his classroom management, and his character, all in front of a room full of parents during open house night. "You don't care about these kids," she declared, her voice echoing off the classroom walls. "You're just here for the paycheck. My daughter comes home crying because you make her feel stupid. What kind of teacher does that?" Every parent in the room turned to stare at Michael. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed to be waiting for his response, and a few appeared to be enjoying the drama. Michael felt his face flush with embarrassment and anger. His first instinct was to defend himself, to list his credentials, his years of service, the countless hours he'd spent helping students after school. But Michael had been studying Stoic philosophy for 3 years, and in this moment of crisis, he remembered Seneca's profound words, "Virtue is nothing else than right reason." He realized that this wasn't about winning an argument or protecting his reputation. It was about demonstrating the very character he tried to teach his students every day. The Stoics built their entire philosophy around virtue, which they defined as living according to wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These weren't abstract ideals, but practical guides for navigating life's most challenging moments. Marcus Aurelius, who faced betrayals, wars, and political intrigue as emperor, wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Michael took a deep breath and responded with what would become a defining moment in his career. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I can see you're deeply concerned about your daughter, and that tells me you're a caring mother. I'd like to meet with you privately this week to discuss how I can better support her learning. Every student deserves to feel valued and successful in my classroom." This response embodied all 4 Stoic virtues. Wisdom in recognizing that a public confrontation would serve no one, justice in acknowledging the mother's legitimate concerns, courage in maintaining his composure under attack, and temperance in controlling his emotional response. The Stoics understood that virtue isn't just about being good, it's about being effective. When we respond to disrespect with virtue, we often achieve better outcomes than when we respond with emotion. Epictetus, who overcame slavery and physical disability to become one of history's great teachers, emphasized that wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. The same principle applies to respect. True dignity comes not from demanding respect from others, but from acting respectably regardless of how others treat us. Consider Sarah Chin, a software engineer at a Seattle tech company who discovered that her male colleague was taking credit for her code contributions during team meetings. When she finally confronted him privately, he dismissed her concerns. "You're being too sensitive. This is just how the industry works. Maybe you should consider a different career if you can't handle it." Sarah's immediate impulse was to escalate the situation to HR, to make a scene, to fight fire with fire. But her Stoic practice had taught her that virtue often requires a more strategic approach. She began documenting her contributions meticulously, sharing her work directly with supervisors and speaking up confidently in meetings. When her colleague tried to claim credit for her latest project, Sarah calmly but firmly corrected the record. "Actually, that was my implementation. I'd be happy to walk everyone through the technical details." Her virtue-based approach, combining wisdom, strategic documentation, justice, accurate attribution, courage, speaking up, and temperance, controlled response, not only protected her work but eventually led to a promotion and her colleagues' reassignment. Marcus Aurelius faced far greater challenges than workplace politics or difficult parents. As emperor, he dealt with plague, war, political conspiracies, and personal betrayals. Yet he consistently returned to virtue as his guide. The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. He understood that external circumstances, including how others treat us, are temporary and largely beyond our control. Our character, however, is entirely within our control and lasts forever. The Stoics taught that virtue is its own reward. When we respond to disrespect with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, we strengthen these qualities within ourselves regardless of the immediate outcome. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Each moment of disrespect becomes an opportunity to practice virtue and build character. This doesn't mean being passive or accepting abuse. Stoic virtue often requires firm boundaries and decisive action. But it means that our responses are guided by principle rather than emotion, by long-term wisdom rather than short-term satisfaction. Michael's virtue-based response transformed that difficult parent conference. Mrs. Rodriguez agreed to meet privately, and through patient conversation, they developed a plan that helped her daughter succeed. More importantly, the other parents witnessed a teacher who embodied the very qualities he was trying to instill in their children. When we make virtue our North Star, disrespect becomes not an attack on our character, but an opportunity to demonstrate it. 6. The discipline of desire. How Stoicism embraces acceptance. Rachel Martinez had been a social worker in Denver's Child Protective Services for 8 years, but nothing had prepared her for the phone call she received last Tuesday morning. The voice on the other end was filled with rage and accusation. "You people destroyed my family. You took my kids away for no reason, and now you won't even return my calls. You're all incompetent bureaucrats who don't care about children. You just want to justify your paychecks." The caller was Mrs. Patterson, whose children had been removed from her home 3 months earlier due to documented neglect. Despite Rachel's repeated attempts to work with the family, provide resources, and create a reunification plan, Mrs. Patterson blamed the system, and Rachel personally, for her situation. Rachel's first instinct was to defend herself, to explain the legal requirements, to list everything she'd done to help the family. But over the years, she'd learned one of the most difficult yet liberating lessons of Stoic philosophy: the discipline of acceptance. Some things are simply not within our control, and fighting against this reality only increases our suffering. This principle comes directly from Epictetus, who knew suffering intimately. Born into slavery, physically disabled, he could have spent his life raging against the injustices he faced. Instead, he discovered a truth that would liberate millions. Some things are within our power, while others are not. This isn't passive resignation. It's the foundation of all personal power and peace. Epictetus taught that we can control our thoughts, our choices, our actions, and our responses. Everything else, other people's behavior, the weather, the past, the future, even our own reputation, lies outside our direct control. He said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not but rejoices for those which he has." Rachel had learned to apply this wisdom daily in her challenging work. She couldn't control whether parents would follow through on their treatment plans, whether judges would make decisions she agreed with, or whether the families she worked with would appreciate her efforts. What she could control was her own professionalism, compassion, and commitment to the children's welfare. "Mrs. Patterson," Rachel said calmly, "I understand you're frustrated and scared. I can't change what's happened, but I can continue working with you on your reunification plan. Would you like to schedule a meeting to discuss your next steps?" This response embodied the Stoic discipline of acceptance, not accepting abuse or giving up on positive change, but accepting the reality of what she could and couldn't control, then focusing her energy where it could make a difference. Consider James Wu, a small business owner in San Francisco's Chinatown, whose restaurant received a scathing one-star review on Yelp. The reviewer claimed the food was inedible, the service terrible, and accused James of being rude and dismissive to customers. The review was posted during the restaurant's busiest week, and James watched his online reservations drop immediately. James's first impulse was to respond angrily, to defend his restaurant's 20-year reputation, to point out the reviewer's obvious exaggerations. But he'd been studying Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate associates you." The emperor understood that some battles cannot be won through force or argument. Instead of fighting the review, James accepted what he couldn't control, the reviewer's opinion and its public posting, and focused on what he could control. He crafted a professional response acknowledging the customer's disappointment and inviting them to return for a better experience. More importantly, he used the feedback as motivation to examine his restaurant's operations and make genuine improvements. The Stoic discipline of acceptance doesn't mean becoming passive or tolerating injustice. Marcus Aurelius spent much of his reign fighting wars and implementing reforms. But he understood the difference between accepting circumstances and accepting defeat. As he wrote in his Meditations, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Take Dr. Patricia Johnson, an emergency room physician in Atlanta, who regularly faces family members angry about wait times, treatment decisions, and medical outcomes. Last month, the son of a patient who died despite her best efforts accused her of malpractice and incompetence in front of the entire ER staff. Dr. Johnson had learned through years of practice that she couldn't control patients' outcomes, families' grief responses, or the inherent uncertainties of medicine. What she could control was her dedication to providing the best possible care and her compassion for families in crisis. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss," she told the grieving son. "I know this is an incredibly difficult time, and I understand you're looking for answers. I did everything medically possible for your father, and I'm available to discuss his care with you when you're ready." Seneca, who faced exile, political persecution, and eventual execution, wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Much of our suffering from disrespect comes from fighting against things we cannot change rather than accepting them and redirecting our energy toward what we can influence." The discipline of acceptance isn't about giving up. It's about focusing our limited time and energy where it can actually make a difference. When we stop fighting battles we cannot win, we become incredibly powerful in the battles we can. 7. The wisdom of lightness, how Stoics use humor. Carlos Mendez was having the worst morning of his career as a construction foreman in Houston. The concrete delivery was 3 hours late, 2 of his best workers had called in sick, and now the client, a wealthy real estate developer named Mr. Harrison, was standing in the middle of the job site, red-faced and shouting loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "This is completely unacceptable," Harrison bellowed, gesturing wildly at the unfinished foundation. "I'm paying you people a fortune, and you can't even manage to pour concrete on schedule. My 5-year-old nephew could run a construction site better than this." Carlos felt his jaw clench and his hands ball into fists. 20 years in construction had taught him to take pride in his work, and Harrison's words felt like a personal attack on everything he'd built his career on. The other workers had stopped what they were doing and were watching to see how their foreman would handle this public humiliation. But then Carlos remembered something Seneca had written nearly 2,000 years ago: "You have mastered yourself when you know how to deal with what you should not take seriously." In that moment, Carlos made a choice that would transform the entire situation. He smiled. "Well, Mr. Harrison," Carlos said with a slight grin, "your nephew sounds like he's got real potential. Maybe when he turns 6, you can put him in charge of your next project. In the meantime, how about we focus on getting this one back on track?" The tension on the job site immediately shifted. Harrison, caught off guard by Carlos's unexpected response, actually chuckled despite himself. The workers relaxed, and what could have become a day-ruining confrontation turned into a problem-solving conversation. This is the power of humor in Stoic philosophy, not as a way to avoid serious issues, but as a tool for maintaining perspective and defusing unnecessary conflict. The Stoics understood that laughter often achieves what anger cannot. It disarms aggression, preserves dignity, and opens space for rational discussion. Marcus Aurelius, despite bearing the enormous weight of ruling the Roman Empire, regularly used humor in his personal writings to maintain perspective on life's challenges. He wrote, "Remember that very little disturbs the happiness of a wise man. It does not thunder and lightning, no, nor fire and earthquake, nor anything which may happen, but only opinion." His ability to find lightness even in serious matters helped him navigate political intrigue, military campaigns, and personal tragedies. The key to Stoic humor is timing and appropriateness. It's not about making jokes at others' expense or dismissing legitimate concerns. Rather, it's about recognizing when a situation has become unnecessarily dramatic and using gentle humor to restore proportion and perspective. Consider Dr. Amanda Foster, a pediatrician in Chicago who regularly deals with anxious parents who become aggressive when their children are sick. Last week, a father whose daughter had a minor ear infection accused her of not taking his child's health seriously because she didn't prescribe antibiotics immediately. "You doctors are all the same," he said loudly in the waiting room. "You don't care about kids, you just want to get through your appointments as quickly as possible. My daughter is in pain, and you're treating it like it's nothing." Dr. Foster could have responded defensively, explaining her medical reasoning or pointing out that viral infections don't respond to antibiotics. Instead, she used gentle humor to defuse the situation. "You know, Mr. Johnson, if I could cure every ear infection with a magic wand, I'd be the most popular pediatrician in Chicago. Unfortunately, I left my wand at my other office. But I can offer you something almost as good, a treatment plan that will actually help your daughter feel better." Her light-hearted response acknowledged the father's concern while gently redirecting the conversation toward solutions. The father's defensive posture softened and they were able to have a productive discussion about his daughter's care. Epictetus, who overcame slavery and physical disability, understood that humor could be a form of inner freedom. Even when external circumstances were beyond his control, he could choose how to interpret and respond to them. He taught that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, and sometimes the wisest reaction is laughter. Take Jennifer Kim, a customer service manager at a Seattle tech company who received an email from an angry customer that began, "Your company is run by incompetent monkeys, and your customer service is worse than a root canal performed by a blindfolded dentist." Jennifer's first instinct was to craft a formal, defensive response explaining company policies. Instead, she chose a different approach. "Dear Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to hear about your frustrating experience. I can't speak for the monkeys in our organization. They're usually pretty competent, but I can definitely help resolve your issue. Let me connect you with someone who can turn your root canal experience into something more like a spa day." The customer's response was immediate and positive. "I wasn't expecting that. Thanks for making me laugh on a really bad day. Let's figure this out together." Seneca warned against taking ourselves too seriously, writing, "Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company." Humor requires this kind of mental flexibility, the ability to step back from our immediate emotional reactions and see situations from a broader perspective. The wisdom of lightness doesn't minimize real problems, it helps us address them more effectively by reducing emotional intensity and opening space for creative solutions. 8. The Fortress of Self-Respect: How Stoicism Means Setting Clear Boundaries. Angela Washington had endured it for 3 months. Every Tuesday morning at the Philadelphia law firm where she worked as a senior associate, her colleague Mark would interrupt her during partner meetings, dismiss her legal arguments with condescending remarks, and even speak over her when she was addressing clients. Last Tuesday was the final straw when Mark actually said, "Let me handle this, Angela. I think the clients need to hear from someone with more experience." Angela felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. She graduated summa cum laude from Penn Law, had more trial experience than Mark, and had brought in 2 major clients this quarter. But instead of exploding or retreating into silence, Angela remembered a crucial Stoic principle: being philosophical doesn't mean being a doormat. The Stoics understood that there's a profound difference between acceptance and passivity, between wisdom and weakness. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded armies and ruled an empire, wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." But he also understood that sometimes the most virtuous response to disrespect is firm, clear resistance. Angela waited until the meeting ended, then approached Mark privately. Her voice was calm but unmistakably firm. "Mark, I need to address something with you. When you interrupt me in meetings or suggest that clients need to hear from someone with more experience, it's disrespectful and unprofessional. I've worked hard to build my expertise and reputation here, and I won't accept being undermined. Going forward, I expect you to let me finish my points and to treat me as the equal colleague that I am." This response embodied what the Stoics called the fortress of self-respect, a clear understanding of your own worth that doesn't depend on others' validation but also doesn't tolerate unnecessary disrespect. Epictetus, who knew what it meant to be powerless as a slave, taught that even in the most constrained circumstances, we always retain the power to define our own dignity. Stoicism is often misunderstood as passive acceptance of mistreatment. But the ancient Stoics were anything but passive. They were teachers, emperors, and advisors who regularly stood up to injustice and defended their principles. The key difference is that they did so from a place of inner strength rather than emotional reactivity. Consider David Chin, a software engineer at a San Francisco startup whose manager consistently took credit for his code contributions during team presentations. For weeks, David had remained silent, thinking that being stoic meant accepting unfair treatment. But he was confusing stoicism with martyrdom. After studying Marcus Aurelius more deeply, David realized that the emperor-philosopher regularly defended the Roman Empire's borders and implemented reforms to protect citizens. Aurelius wrote, "The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like your enemy." This didn't mean accepting injustice, it meant responding to injustice with virtue rather than vice. David scheduled a private meeting with his manager. "Sarah, I need to discuss something important. In the last 3 team meetings, you've presented my code solutions as your own work. I understand that as the team lead, you're responsible for our collective output, but I need proper attribution for my individual contributions. This isn't just about recognition, it's about accurate documentation for performance reviews and career development." His approach was direct but respectful, focused on facts rather than emotions, and offered a path forward rather than just criticism. This is boundary setting in the Stoic tradition, clear, firm, and guided by principle rather than anger. Seneca, who navigated the dangerous political waters of imperial Rome, understood that boundaries often require courage. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Sometimes we must end patterns of disrespect to begin relationships based on mutual respect. Take Maria Rodriguez, a nurse at a busy Los Angeles hospital who was regularly assigned the most difficult patients and extra shifts by her supervisor while her colleagues received preferred schedules. Maria initially accepted this as part of being a dedicated professional, but she gradually realized that her supervisor was taking advantage of her work ethic. Maria requested a private meeting. "I've noticed that I've been assigned the most challenging cases and extra shifts consistently over the past 2 months. While I'm committed to providing excellent patient care, I need a more equitable distribution of difficult assignments. I'd like to discuss how we can balance the workload more fairly among the team." Her boundary was clear, professional, and focused on fairness rather than personal grievance. She wasn't refusing to do difficult work, she was insisting on equitable treatment. The Stoics taught that boundaries aren't walls built from anger or resentment, they're principles established from self-respect and wisdom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Part of that power includes the decision of what treatment we will and won't accept. Effective Stoic boundaries share several characteristics. They're communicated calmly and clearly, they focus on behavior rather than character attacks, they offer paths forward rather than just criticism, and they're enforced consistently. Most importantly, they come from a place of self-respect rather than wounded pride. Angela's conversation with Mark transformed their working relationship. Mark initially became defensive, but Angela's calm professionalism made it clear that she wasn't attacking him personally, she was establishing professional standards. Within weeks, their interactions became more collaborative and respectful. Being a rock doesn't mean being immovable, it means being unshakable in your principles while remaining flexible in your methods. 9. The liberation of letting go, how Stoics forgive. Kevin Martinez stared at the computer screen in his Atlanta office, reading the email for the 3rd time. His former employee, Jason, whom he'd had to let go 6 months earlier due to budget cuts, had sent a scathing message to several of Kevin's biggest clients. The email accused Kevin of being an incompetent manager who runs his business into the ground and suggested that clients would be better served by more professional companies. Kevin felt his chest tighten with anger and betrayal. He'd given Jason opportunities, mentored him, and even provided a glowing reference when he left. Now Jason was actively trying to destroy the small marketing agency Kevin had spent 15 years building. His first instinct was to fight back, to contact Jason's new employer, to threaten legal action, to defend his reputation publicly. But as Kevin sat in his office that evening, watching the Atlanta skyline darken, he remembered something Marcus Aurelius had written in his personal journal: "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." The Roman emperor, who had faced betrayals far more serious than a disgruntled employee's email, understood something profound about the nature of forgiveness. It's not a gift we give to others, but a gift we give to ourselves. Stoic forgiveness isn't about pretending that hurtful actions didn't happen or that they were acceptable. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying resentment, anger, and the desire for revenge. As Seneca wrote, "Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured." Kevin had learned this lesson through years of studying Stoic philosophy. He realized that holding on to anger about Jason's betrayal would hurt him far more than it would hurt Jason. Every moment he spent plotting revenge or nursing his wounded pride was a moment stolen from building his business, serving his clients, and enjoying his life. This doesn't mean Kevin ignored the practical implications of Jason's actions. He contacted his clients to address any concerns, documented the situation for potential legal action if necessary, and took steps to protect his business. But he did all of this from a place of rational planning rather than emotional reactivity. Consider Dr. Sarah Kim, a pediatrician in Chicago who discovered that a former colleague had been spreading rumors about her competence after she'd refused to cover his shifts during a family emergency. The rumors had reached several hospitals where she was seeking privileges, potentially damaging her career prospects. Sarah's initial reaction was fury and a desire to expose her colleague's unprofessional behavior publicly. But she'd been practicing Stoic principles for years and understood that revenge often creates more problems than it solves. Instead, she chose what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, focusing her energy on what she could control rather than what she couldn't. "I can't control what he says about me," Sarah reflected, "but I can control my response and my actions moving forward." She addressed the rumors professionally with the hospitals, provided documentation of her qualifications and track record, and let her work speak for itself. Most importantly, she refused to let her colleagues' actions poison her own character with bitterness or revenge. Marcus Aurelius, who faced political conspiracies and personal betrayals throughout his reign, wrote, "Whenever you want to cheer yourself, consider the good qualities of your companions." He understood that forgiveness often begins with recognizing our shared humanity even with those who have hurt us. This doesn't mean being naive about human nature or failing to protect ourselves from future harm. Stoic forgiveness is wise forgiveness. It recognizes that people often act badly from their own pain, insecurity, or ignorance, but it doesn't require us to trust them or expose ourselves to repeated harm. Take Jennifer Walsh, a high school principal in Portland whose former assistant principal had undermined her authority with parents and teachers before transferring to another school. The assistant principal's actions had created months of administrative chaos and damaged several important relationships. Jennifer could have spent years nursing resentment about the betrayal, or she could have tried to damage her former colleague's reputation at his new position. Instead, she chose the Stoic path. She acknowledged the hurt, learned from the experience, and then consciously released the anger that was serving no constructive purpose. Holding on to anger about what happened would only continue the damage he caused, Jennifer realized. The best way to heal from betrayal is to refuse to let it change who I am or how I treat others. Epictetus, who overcame slavery and physical disability to become one of history's great teachers, understood that forgiveness is ultimately about freedom from the emotional chains that bind us to past hurts. He taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Practical Stoic forgiveness involves several steps. First, acknowledge the reality of what happened without minimizing or excusing it. Second, recognize that carrying resentment hurts you more than the person who wronged you. Third, choose to release the emotional charge around the event while maintaining appropriate boundaries for the future. Finally, focus your energy on what you can control, your own actions, relationships, and goals. Kevin never responded directly to Jason's email campaign. Instead, he focused on providing excellent service to his existing clients and building new relationships. Within a year, his business had grown beyond where it was before Jason's departure. More importantly, Kevin had preserved his own peace of mind and character. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or reconciling, it's about refusing to let others' actions determine our inner state. As Seneca wrote, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When we forgive, we end our bondage to past hurts and begin the possibility of genuine peace and freedom. The ultimate act of strength isn't revenge, it's the courage to let go and move forward with grace. 10. The view from above, how Stoicism will change your perspective. As the sun set over the bustling streets of Chicago, Emily Chun sat on a park bench, reflecting on her day. The pressure of her job as a financial analyst had been mounting for weeks. Between demanding deadlines, aggressive clients, and the constant pressure to outperform, she felt overwhelmed. That afternoon, during a presentation, her manager had publicly criticized her analysis, calling it flawed in front of the entire team. Emily felt humiliated and anxious, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. But then she remembered a key Stoic practice known as the view from above, which involves stepping back from immediate emotions to gain a broader perspective. This technique, championed by Marcus Aurelius, encourages us to see our problems within the larger context of life. As he wrote in his Meditations, "You have the power to strip away the opinions of others and to see things as they truly are." In that moment, Emily took a deep breath and began to practice the view from above. Instead of fixating on her manager's harsh words, she envisioned herself hovering above the situation, watching it unfold from a distance. She imagined the larger picture, her career trajectory, her growth as a professional, and the fact that one critique, however harsh, did not define her worth or future. This practice allowed her to see that her manager's comments, while painful, stemmed from the pressure he was under to deliver results to his superiors. It wasn't a personal attack on her capabilities, but rather a reflection of the high-stress environment they were all navigating. By adopting this broader perspective, Emily could detach herself from the immediate emotional turmoil and focus on how to improve her work without being paralyzed by fear or embarrassment. The view from above is a powerful Stoic tool that helps us contextualize our challenges and recognize the fleeting nature of our daily struggles. When we step back and see life from a higher vantage point, we realize that most grievances, while significant in the moment, are often minor in the grand scheme of our lives. Consider the case of David Lee, an attorney in New York City who faced a similar challenge. During a high-stakes trial, opposing counsel launched a personal attack against David, questioning his integrity and competence in front of the jury. In that moment, David felt a surge of anger and humiliation. But instead of retaliating, he employed the view from above. David visualized the courtroom from a higher perspective, seeing not just the immediate confrontation but the entire trial process and its implications for his career. He remembered Marcus Aurelius's advice: "Look at the whole universe, and then you will see that all of this is but a small part of it." This realization helped David respond calmly, refocusing on the case rather than the attack. He addressed the jury with poise, emphasizing the facts of the case and maintaining his professionalism, which ultimately won their respect and strengthened his position. The Stoics taught that our perceptions shape our reality. When we view our challenges through the lens of the universe, we can see how small our individual grievances are compared to the vastness of existence. This does not diminish our experiences, but rather places them in a context that allows us to respond with wisdom rather than impulsivity. Embracing the view from above also cultivates empathy. When we recognize that others are navigating their own struggles, it becomes easier to respond to their disrespect or negativity with understanding rather than anger. For instance, Lisa, a teacher in San Francisco, faced daily challenges with a difficult student who often disrupted her classes. Instead of viewing the student as merely problematic, Lisa began to consider the broader context of his life, his home environment, his struggles with learning, and the pressures he faced. By employing the view from above, Lisa developed a deeper sense of compassion. She reached out to the student, seeking to understand his challenges and offering support rather than punishment. The result was a transformation in their relationship, leading to improved behavior and academic performance. As Marcus Aurelius stated, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." When we adopt the view from above, we see that our individual actions and reactions impact not just ourselves but also those around us. Recognizing our interconnectedness fosters a sense of collective responsibility and encourages us to act in ways that contribute positively to our communities. The practice of the view from above can also be applied to our personal lives. When faced with family conflict or relationship issues, stepping back can help us see the situation more clearly. For example, when Sarah and her husband had a disagreement about finances, rather than letting anger dictate their responses, they practiced the view from above. They took a moment to reflect on their shared goals, their commitment to each other, and the bigger picture of their life together. This perspective allowed them to communicate constructively and resolve their differences. Incorporating the view from above into our daily lives can lead to profound changes in how we handle stress, conflict, and disappointment. We learn to prioritize what truly matters, recognizing that our emotional responses are often temporary and that our ability to choose our reactions remains in our control. As Emily continued to reflect on her day, she felt a renewed sense of strength. She resolved to take her manager's feedback constructively, not as a personal failure but as an opportunity for growth. By practicing the view from above, she had transformed her pain into purpose. As we come to the end of this exploration into the practical wisdom of Stoicism, it's essential to reflect on how these ancient principles can transform our daily lives. The Stoics believed that philosophy is not just a theoretical pursuit but a way of life, a guide to navigating the complexities of human existence with grace and dignity. By incorporating the lessons we've discussed into your everyday routine, you can cultivate resilience, emotional intelligence, and a profound sense of inner peace. Throughout this journey, we've touched on various Stoic principles, from mastering our perceptions and embracing self-reflection to using humor as a tool for maintaining perspective and setting healthy boundaries. Each of these practices offers a unique pathway to personal growth and empowerment. For instance, the discipline of perception teaches us that our emotional responses are shaped by our thoughts. By consciously choosing how we interpret events, we can maintain our calm and composure amidst chaos. The inner citadel encourages us to engage in self-reflection, ensuring that our reactions are grounded in wisdom rather than impulse. When we examine our thoughts and feelings critically, we can respond to challenges more effectively. The power of the pause reminds us of the importance of taking a moment before reacting. This simple practice can prevent unnecessary conflict and help us respond from a place of clarity. Empathy allows us to connect with others, understanding their motivations and fears, which fosters compassion and reduces hostility in our interactions. The fortress of self-respect empowers us to set clear boundaries, asserting our value without resorting to anger or resentment. The liberation of letting go encourages us to forgive, not for others' sake, but to free ourselves from the burden of negativity and resentment. The view from above invites us to gain perspective on our challenges, reminding us that many of our grievances are temporary and small in the grand scheme of life. As you take these lessons into your daily life, consider establishing a regular Stoic practice. Start each day with a moment of reflection, review your goals and intentions, and remind yourself of the virtues you wish to embody. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to assess how well you lived according to those principles. What went well? What could you improve? This practice of reflection not only promotes growth but also reinforces your commitment to living as a Stoic, a person guided by reason, virtue, and resilience. Now, as we conclude, I invite you to take action. Embrace the Stoic path forward. If you found value in this exploration of Stoicism, please leave a thumbs up to help us reach more people seeking ancient wisdom in their modern lives. If you're new to our channel, consider subscribing to Stoic Vivu for more insights and practical applications of Stoic philosophy. We're dedicated to making these timeless teachings accessible and relevant to your everyday challenges. Share this video with friends, family, or anyone who might benefit from a dose of Stoic wisdom. Together, we can cultivate a community where ancient philosophy meets modern living, empowering one another to face life's challenges with strength, dignity, and grace. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Stoicism. Remember, the practice of philosophy is a continuous path, and each day offers new opportunities to grow, learn, and embody the principles we've discussed. Stay Stoic.